When I said back in January of 2025 that border plan isn't just to keep people out, it's to keep you in, I wasn't just talking out of my ass. When I said that you might want to start applying for a visa if you plan on leaving because you might not be able to once Uranus is in Gemini, I wasn't saying that to fearmonger. Let's roll the clip. So many people are saying that we're gonna get the fuck up out of this country when Trump becomes president, but I'm gonna be real with you, it might not be possible soon. Because let's be clear, that border plan isn't just to keep people out, it's to keep you in. If you do plan on leaving, specifically to Europe, I would say do that process right now. Expect other countries to maybe put sanctions on the US or at least some sort of restrictions on the immigration process for Americans specifically to be refugees and flee this country. We're gonna see shakeups and disruptions to borders, education, transportation, secession movements, communication, and war. Whether it's civil war or a bigger war, but war regardless. If you're unfamiliar, I have a political astrology podcast with my co-host where we've been talking about what's to come for the next 7 years since back in January of 2024. Specifically around the idea that other countries would start to impose sanctions on the United States. Other countries will start to enforce sanctions and travel bans on US citizens from coming into their country because, yeah, you guys are genocidal maniacs. Specifically in response to the United States' government and its military and its genocidal operations. US airlines are now locked out of Caribbean US territory airports because of the Venezuelan airstrikes, and people are stranded right now. Like, they cannot leave. Mali and Burkina Faso have also enforced retaliatory travel bans on US citizens. Uranus is currently retrograde in Taurus, but once it goes direct again in Gemini, major disruptions to travel for the next 7 years, specifically from this country, trying to limit and restrict people from leaving, especially if you are vocal against the government, especially if you are pro-Palestinian. Remember back in like November or December when the government shut down for weeks on end and nobody could fly out because TSA and the airlines were shut down? Yeah, that was a soft test. Major airlines right now are getting information from every single person and giving that information over to ICE. It doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or US citizen, it does not matter. And because we're going to be having these major disruptions to travel, we have emphasized in this episode, you are going to have to find alternative methods of travel. What are you going to do when, not if, when you cannot leave? How are you going to get around from point A to point B if the highways are shut down, either because of the military, because of ICE, or because people are starting to fight back? More protests inevitably keep popping up and flights are then shut down. How are you going to get around? Or even if it just becomes dangerous in general to fly, if pilots keep getting COVID and they have more and more brain fog that prevents them from being able to accurately and safely fly, if there's more budget cuts to the ways that people are manufacturing and repairing planes, how are you going to get around? And let's put international travel aside. What are you going to do when there's just domestic travel shutdowns, when you can't even get from one state to the other without showing your papers or ID because of the military, because of Border Patrol, ICE? How are you going to get around if the National Guard is stopping you for your papers? That's a deep cut from our first episode back in February of 2024. Even from an environmental standpoint, if you cannot travel because there is an environmental disaster, there's a climate catastrophe due to the US military, due to these increasing genocides and bombings worldwide, how are you going to get around? The Pacific Northwest was just flooded with barely any coverage. Alaska, even Appalachia. Again, how are you going to get around when traditional methods of travel are no longer an option? When the dependence and reliance on cars and just car culture as a whole starts to tank. Do you have a boat? Do you have a horse? Do you have a method of community transport? All of these things are going to have to be thought about and planned ahead of time. Just with the hyper implementation of the surveillance state in areas of public transport, again, how are you going to get around this? I need y'all to understand that it does not matter what your status is as a citizen. Like, that means nothing. That means nothing. And y'all need to really just remove this American exceptionalist mentality that you have, thinking that you're going to be safe when fascism starts knocking at everybody's door. Because it's already been here for the past 400 years. It's just going into overdrive now. And because I come with receipts, I'm gonna leave y'all with just this small little clip from our second podcast episode, just so you know, I know what I'm talking about. Make sure to follow me there.
And on top of other countries maybe potentially barring US citizens from coming to their country, who's to say that this country won't do the same thing just with its own citizens, and say that no, actually you don't have the right to extend your visa, maybe have tighter visa restrictions and tighter limitations on how long you can be at the country, or if you can even go to certain countries, or which countries are eligible for US citizens to go to. They might try to do this out of this fake sort of guise of safety, like, oh, it's not safe for US citizens and we need to protect ourselves, we need to protect our borders. I mean, like, in terms of Cuba and North Korea, there are so many hoops that you need to go through as an American citizen just to visit these countries. Like, it is extremely difficult just to get into these countries as a US citizen. So who's to say that, the United States would be like, no, like, travel isn't, a right. It's not a freedom. It's not, something that's stated in the Constitution. They could definitely try to impose extremely tight restrictions on the ways that people can travel, especially if people are already saying that, oh, I'm planning on leaving, and that severely threatens the access to the labor pool that this country has. If people just start leaving in mass, who's like, there's nothing that would stop them from being like, actually, no, you can't leave the country. Sorry, you're going to have a very legitimate reason for traveling in the future, because people are starting or are having these conversations about fleeing. If you have the means and the money to do so, granted, it is a very extensive process, especially as fascism starts to really make itself known. If you come from a very specific part of the world, or you're first gen, or, you have a very specific last name, you have a very specific ethnicity, a very specific religion, who's to say that these specific demographics of people would be given the leisure and the luxury of being able to travel? There's already, discrimination and targets on people who go to the airport and they already live here, getting just stopped because you're a hijabi, or you look visibly brown or Muslim or black or foreign. All of these things are already here, and they're definitely just going to intensify with these transits.
Yeah, and I'll also add, I think we'll see them, like other countries may try to stop their citizens from visiting the United States because they think the United States is like a terrorist organization, which
I mean, hello?
I don't disagree at all.
Well, yes.
Yeah. They're going to be like, yeah, it's not safe for you to visit the United States. Don't go. And then that's going to put more pressure on the U.S. to get its shit together. But it's already collapsing. So don't even try.
Literally, it's going to be this thing where, like, even if people want to leave because there is internal fascism, as a protective measure, border-wise, other countries might be like, no, we're going to put sanctions on the U.S. Yeah, plot twist, you guys have the sanctions now. You can't come here. You're not able to be here because and we were talking about how a lot of white liberals are going to try and leave. Yeah. They might try and leave the country, and maybe they'll have some room and opportunity to do that, but they're definitely going to try and leave these major cities where a lot of this state suppression is, because they don't want to be on the receiving end. They're just going to go to the country where it's just mainly white people doing white people things, being oppressive with each other. So yeah, it's just going to be this like race of who can flee the fastest and what routes can we take, because it's just going to be chaos for multiple reasons, for protection reasons, for aggression reasons, like borders and travel. Like, it's just going to be a lot of people like playing chess with each other and blocking who can move where, who can go where.